This is Umar for BoxNation. I'm at the headquarters of Frank Warren. I'm joined by Frank Warren on what was a very difficult weekend for boxing. We lost two icons in different ways in their sport. Obviously, George Foreman was one of the best heavyweights of all time, and also someone who was just known across the world for that miraculous comeback he made, the Foreman grills, of course. He was just an icon in general, not just in boxing. And then, of course, someone that was very close to you, a dear friend to you, who was there from the very start, one of the most esteemed journalists, probably boxing scene, certainly in this country, Colin Hart, unfortunately passed away as well. So it was quite a difficult weekend for boxing. Frank, how do you look back on it?
Well, it was obviously a difficult weekend for boxing with the loss of both of them. In their respective fields, they were both iconic. It's terrible for their families, and obviously condolences to their families. And it's quite ironic that, in Colin, he was the last British journalist to attend the Rumble in the Jungle, who up until he passed away was the last living journalist, and it was in a couple of days of George passing away. George Foreman was one of the holy trinity of the three heavyweights of their generation and their time in Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier and George. They were unbelievable fighters who fought each other in some of the most amazing fights and in some of the most amazing venues, and produced not just great fights, but great sporting iconic and great sporting moments. It goes across all sports. And it's sad that he's gone. I had the privilege of promoting him in 1990 at London Arena on his comeback trail, and he was a lot different then from the first incarnation of George Foreman, which was him coming from the Olympics, 68 Olympics, winning the gold medal at heavyweight, and was quite a surly, I'm not saying miserable, but you didn't get any. You'd never been able to do an interview. It was all monosyllabic answers, very gruff, and after that fight against Ali in Zaire, he basically, went off the radar for a while, and then took 10 years out. And when he came back having been ordained as a preacher, and he was the most friendly guy you could meet. He changed completely. Well, you couldn't get a word out of him. You couldn't stop him talking, and it was quite. It was quite a privilege for me to be putting this fight on in the UK. It's the first time he ever fought, and the only time in the UK, and it was a dream for the press. We sold out the arena. He was a great fighter, great man, great entrepreneur. Selling his grills, I think he sold them for 140 million. So he was a very clever guy. I think he had 5 or 6 boys, all called George. I think he had a couple of daughters called George as well. Very fond memories of him and working with him that time, and obviously very, very fond memories as I look at myself as a boxing man, watching him in fights, and and the fighter he was exciting fighter, big punching, exciting fighter.
Listen, with both George and Colin, they had such incredible careers that we'd need probably about a year on each to cover.
Well, Colin, I was going to get on to Colin. Colin, he's a friend. I've known him for 47 years. I met him first time I ever met him was in America at Atlantic City when John Conte was out there. John Conte fights before I got my border control license, and my early days in boxing, him and I didn't get on too well. He was, just how it was. And we had a little bit of a fallout, and it lasted for many, many years. And eventually we buried the hatchet, we had a meal, and we've become quite good friends. I was very respectful of even though he weren't speaking, as a journalist and as a boxing man, and his knowledge of boxing. He was old school, he spent time in the gyms watching these guys. He had friendships with fighters. He knew what they went through. He wasn't one of these guys just come along and dipped in now and then. That was in the generation and the days when newspapers had designated boxing writers. Every newspaper had a boxing writer. And Colin obviously was the boxing writer for The Sun. He was very, very well respected. All the big fights, I think he'd done about 8 Olympic Games. And not just in boxing, as a athletics. He was athletics writer as well. So he was, covered the 2 sports. And he was just a nice bloke. I had my my differences. I don't mean like arguments. I mean, our opinions differed sometimes on fighters. He was quite opinionated, probably like me, but he stood his ground, and he always put a good case forward for what he was talking about, and knew what he was talking about. He was. We used to talk on a lot on Sundays. He'd phone me up. We'd have a roll call. And then we'd have a chat about the fight the night before, and they'd talk about West Ham, and I'd talk about Arsenal, and that was it. And he was I think it must be about 5 weeks ago. We went out to lunch, himself, me, and Gareth Jones, who's our vice chairman at Queensberry, and his dad was Ken Jones, the writer. So they were. Colin and him were friends and so on. And I was surprised at how he looked. He'd lost a lot of weight. And he called me a few days later. He got the bill, by the way. I went to have a pee and he got the bill. He called me a few days later, and it was quite sad. He said, "I've got some news to tell you." I went, "What's that?" He said, "I've got cancer, stage 4 cancer they found. And I've got it in a pancreatic cancer, and basically I can't eat anymore. And they've given me days or weeks, and that's it." And I went, "What'd you say?" I was gutted for him, and obviously, it's sad, horrible news, and his family. And but he was very philosophical, and he was very brave. And in what he said that he's had a great life. He said, "I've had a fantastic time, doing what I love. I've been all around the world, met great people. I've got a fabulous family, lovely wife Cindy, his daughters," and he was just so. I'd do it all again. I wouldn't change anything. I'd do it all again. I've loved my life, and I thought that's a bloody good way to be, And it showed, and I say, he faced up to it and was very brave about it, and spoke a couple of times to Cindy and Colin. Then obviously he went into hospital and he died at 4:00 last Saturday on the weekend, and it's really sad. It's really sad. They're not many, what I would say, real good quality journalists who know their trade like he knew his trade. There's just very few of them around, and he knew his boxing, very knowledgeable about his boxing, and he we'll miss him. We'll miss him in a big way. It was a good thing as well. He came out to Riyadh. His Excellency invited him out there. Should we invite him? I said, yeah. I said, he'll love it. And he came out, and so he came out to see Tyson's big fight out there with Usyk. And he had a good time, and he was with everybody, and he was involved in it all. And he was guest of honour at His Excellency had a dinner at his house. Colin was head of the table, and it was nice. It was really nice. No one knew what was going to happen. So it was and he enjoyed it. So he had he knew that everybody had a lot of respect for him as a journalist, and as a human being.
It's nice to hear what Colin said to you about his life was fulfilled, and I'm not surprised, because you just have to Google Colin Hart and see some of the fights that he attended, and the one that really springs to mind, and it is kind of fitting that they did both pass away on the same weekend, because it brings me on to the Rumble in the Jungle, which is the most iconic moment in boxing. And he was the one of very, very few people who picked Muhammad Ali, had a good relationship with Ali. But George Foreman, going into that fight, wasn't just expected to win. People saying he was going to kill Ali.
We destroyed Joe Frazier, didn't
6 times he dropped him.
He won him, that's where. Joe Frazier's a great fighter, one of the greats, and You know, he caught him with, I mean, the power he had. I remember one moment he caught Joe and he sort of went up in the air, took him up in the air, and he sort of landed on his knee like he was, you know, kneeling down. It was, you know, he was a monster. And going into that fight, he was a massive favourite. And I think a lot of the American journalists, nobody picked. I think one may have picked him. Everybody was all picking Foreman, the same as it was in the UK. And I think there's only two journalists. One was Colin, and the other one was Walter Bartman, who was another fine old gentleman, great writer. He was a great writer, come from Islington, and he was a fabulous bloke. And they both picked him. And Ali, and you can understand why. You know, Ali then was 32 years of age. His legs was gone. You know, all the rope-a-dope, as he called it back then. First of all, the fight got postponed. It was on, then it got postponed, and Mobutu, who was the president, dictator in Zaire, he said he wanted everybody to stay, and they stayed there till the fight took place. And Ali was great at bringing the crowd on his side because his personality and everybody was supporting him, and George became the villain of the piece without being a villain, if you know what I mean. He'd done nothing wrong, and in that fight, it was you know, most people thought that George was going to knock him out because of the power of the punches. And when Ali was on the ropes, he was catching punches on his shoulders and to his body, took a lot to the body, and he could take a shot, Ali, and he absorbed them. And George basically punched himself out. I think it was about round 9, wasn't it? Or whatever.
Round 9, yeah.
I think it was round 9. He
caught him with a combination.
He just see the moment, and he caught him for a shot, and you should see that he was gone, and he was just out of it, and it was a massive upset, and it was a unbelievable moment again in sport. That was an iconic moment in sport, not just boxing, in sport. It went around the world. I mean, millions upon millions of people see it. It's Don King's got the contract signed. Hank Schwartz was the guy in America who basically put most of it together, but it was financed by John Hemdale, which is a British company, which was David Hemmings, the actor, and John Daly, who's the producer. He made some great films like Platoon, and I'm not sure it was his dad or his uncle, worked at the Thomas and Becket. They were seconds and whatever, so they were the people to put it together. It was a fabulous moment in sport. And Ali, everybody loved Ali, but everybody loved Foreman. And the next time, the time after the fight he had, they brought a video out, the three of them, Ali, Frazier, and Foreman, and they came over to promote it, and we hosted it at London Arena back then. And Joe Frazier did not like Muhammad Ali because of all the things he said about him prior to all their fights, and there was no love lost there at all. Ali would try to build bridges, but Joe wouldn't have it because he just said some very hurtful things to Joe Frazier, calling him Uncle Tom and all sorts of things. And George was was the glue holding it all together, and he could see how much he respected and liked Ali. Ali at that stage had Parkinson's, and he was fussing over him and looking after him. It was quite touching, and that was George. He was a lovely man, and those three guys. I mean, bloody hell, in any era. I mean, they would be. Can you imagine? They'd be a bloody handful for everybody. Great fighters.
Well, that was a world gripping moment, as you said, not the way George would have wanted, but he had another world gripping moment at 45 years old when he beat Michael Moorer. That was remarkable to do that at 45, the oldest heavyweight champion. It's going to be tough to break that. Someone might do it, but it's going to be very tough to do. And George shocked the world that night, Frank. Just give me your recollections of that night.
No, he did. I mean, he did it, and he came back and he did what he had to do. The one thing about him was the power that he had. He was he wasn't a fast heavyweight, but he was a punishing heavyweight. His punches were so. I mean, he was such a big, powerful man. He lost a few fights towards the end of his career, but he did something that I don't see anybody doing that now. I really don't.
Do you think Klitschko could?
Well, look, one thing about Klitschko, keeps himself in great condition. Who knows? But would he beat one of? Would he beat a Usyk? Would he beat a Daniel Dubois? I don't think so.
But that fight with Foreman and Mora, what do you remember about it? Do you remember where you were when you were watching it?
I don't actually remember where I was on that fight. I remember where I was with all the other ones that we talked about, but no, I don't remember where I was with that. But I watched the fight, and it was a fight because obviously we did one of the fights on his comeback, and it was quite.
Mora was an exceptional fight.
He was a good fighter. He was a very good fighter. I mean, George weren't no favourite going into that at all, but he done a job. He done what he had to do, and it was a fabulous win for him.
I guess with George, it shows never give up. I mean, that saying gets used a lot, but he is a prime example of that.
He is, and he had the resolve and the wherewithal, and he had the knowledge as well. He weren't what everybody thought was just a big lumbering heavyweight. He had a good boxing brain.
He's a gold medalist, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
And the time that you had the luxury, I say luxury because he's an absolute legend, of promoting George here for that fight. Just give me your, what do you remember about George as a person? How was he with you? I know he met your sons when they were very young, George and Francis as well. How was he as a man when you met him?
He was really good. I mean, he obviously he was a man on a mission. He wanted to come back and win the world title. He was very friendly. He was, as I said, he was totally different from the first version of George Foreman. He was ultra friendly. As I say, we sold out the venue, the fans. I mean, it's a one-rounder for a guy called Terry Anderson. Fight he was expected to win. But he was very accommodating to everybody, photographs and everything. And I remember we went to see him spar because we set up training camp for him at London Arena. And I can remember it was one Sunday, I took the kids down there, George and Francis. They were really, really young. Was it 35 years ago? And their photos done. I think it's got George, more or less, George Foreman's got my George like that in his hand, and got Francis who's sitting that side of him. They were just young kids.
Yeah. With now, Ken Norton, Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, all in a better place, we hope. We've seen another incredible era with Lennox, Vander, Mike Tyson. But the names I just mentioned there who have sadly left us were Muhammad, Joe, George and Ken Norton. Do you think it can ever get better than that era? No, there was some. Can it get better? I think there's some real competitive fights to be made today. There are competitive fights. You've got a guy out there who's the number one in Usyk. Tyson's retired at the moment. Whether that's at the moment or for good, I don't know, but he's retired. You've got Daniel there who's found himself and has put in some brilliant performances. You've got Fabio, who's put together some good wins as well and looking good. And certainly his last one looked spectacular. You've got even Derek Chisora's got himself back in, got into the picture again. Moses is coming up.
Moses as a young up and coming guy. You've got David Adelaide, who's just had a good win. You've got Caballero, Ajit Caballero.
I guess you
Parker, Joe Parker. That's a good crop of
heavyweights. It is a very good.
And every fight would be a competitive fight with all of them.
I guess as time moves on, you can always get better fighters and quite a lot of them within one era. But what I mean by that Ali, Frazier, Foreman and Norton era was the legacies they all left, how special it was. A lot of it because obviously Ali and his story, but maybe you won't get such a special era just in one time like that in terms of what they did for history, not in terms of just boxing, but life as well.
Well, that's true. I mean, with Ali, there was obviously the civil rights era, and he was a champion of that. The fact that he then changed his religion to become a Muslim, all of that happened. All of those things, they were at significant moments. In the 60s, 70s, all the way through there, exciting times. Anyone grew up in it. I mean, everybody said, the 60s was the greatest era and the 70s and so forth. They were great times. George won his medal in the 68 Olympics. And the music and everything was changing. It was like a revolution around the world, certainly in the Western world.
That's what I mean. Actually, the heavyweight division.
You got to put that. You put that narrative to it. It weren't just the boxing. It was the events. We talk about Riyadh season, but you go back to the fights in Kinshasa. You go to Jamaica, Fleur in Manila. There's big fights in Malaysia. All around, these fights were happening in places where they'd never happened before.
Yeah, I think that's what more actually my question was geared towards, that the heavyweight division was actually the epicenter of life in general. And as you said, it was revolutionary times. Bringing it back to Colin, as I said, he was right at the center of it, covering all these mega occasions. And something that struck to me about Colin, a lot of people in the media now, I'm sure, would say the same thing. Didn't matter who you were, he had time for everyone. And I was fortunate on a lot of occasions just to speak to him. And, we just, not even about boxing, we'd speak about a lot of things, but he didn't have to give me or anyone else his time. It was an elderly bloke who'd been there, done it all. He could have just come to work and left, but he had a lot of time for everyone, and he was just a nice person.
He was, and he encouraged young people, especially anybody getting in the game and whatever. He would, if you give him a little bit of advice, but he would encourage them. And he was a nice bloke, and we all liked him. And he was interesting, and the fact he'd been around then and he'd done those things. I mean, I'm no youngster, but I was sort of around and was involved in some of it. But he was just a really nice man. He was a good bloke. And even if I disagreed with him one time, I said we didn't speak for a little while. Well, quite a long while actually, but we still had the respect for what we were doing, looking back just a few weeks ago when we had our lunch, we were sitting there and talking about old times. Old people do that; they talk about old times and fights and things and the history of it, and some people are no longer here, and then what's happening today, and is this guy going to make it, and so forth. And he was on the money with it all. He's nothing wrong with his mind.
He was very switched on.
Yeah, there was nothing wrong with his mind. He was just a few months off of being 90. And, it's just bloody, it's sad. I mean, there's people, and I've had, in my family, my mother-in-law, she got Alzheimer's, and she had it for years and years. And it was sad that, mind wasn't there, but the body's there, if you know what I mean. Excuse me. And with Colin, it was like his body had given up on him with the cancer, but his brain was there. He was very alert, and I think it was only about a week before he died. I rang him and Cindy's wife and I said, "It's Colin. He's just gone down the shop." He was a tough old sod.
I guess with what he told you at that lunch, it wasn't, a total shock to you, but you had a very good relationship with him. He was there from the very beginning. I guess in terms of people within the media and journalists, the one you've known for the longest as well. So how were you actually when you heard that news?
Well, I was very sad when it happened, but it was expected because he told me. And I remember, and I spoke to Cindy, and she said that he'd gone to hospital. He had a couple of blood clots to get removed in his leg, and then he had a couple of strokes in the hospital, and they weren't coming out. They weren't going to let him out of the hospital. So it was, it was bloody sad. It's like one of your mates are going, isn't it? He's part of the furniture as far as boxing is concerned. I mean, that every press conference. He was there. He was there, wasn't he?
Fight night.
Because he loved it. Fight night.
At a lot of levels as well, not just the big fights.
Yeah, he'd be down at York Hall. I mean, he didn't pick and choose the big ones. I mean, you're absolutely right. And when we'd have calls on Sunday calls, and it'd be talk about some young kid he's seen on the card. Yeah, it's good. And not a lot of people, there's just not a lot of people like that around in boxing now.
I hope I haven't got this wrong. Was he the one? This was quite a while ago when Daniel was just coming up, but he said, "Don't worry about Fury or Joshua. Daniel's the one to watch it." Was that from Colin? That was.
Yeah.
Well, in some ways, he's been proven right at the moment.
Yeah. It's bloody. It's it's sad. It's sad, and that's I'm sure his funeral will be an amazing, or memorial service would be an amazing occasion of people coming out and paying their respects to him. I mean, it's not just boxing, it's athletics as well. He's Linford Christie, all those guys. Connie Henry, all of them. He was there. He was there with them, and they respected him. Seb Coe's a big mate.
How do you think you'll be remembered, Colin?
As the doyen of British boxing writers, and as a nice bloke, a decent man.
Yeah, I guess because you kind of knew it was coming. You said, it wasn't a shock or anything, but is it going to be difficult for you as well? Because after a big fight, as you said, you'd have a call with him. I'm sure you've had about 1 million lunches, so it was fitting that you had a lunch 4 or 5 weeks ago. I've been lucky to be at some of those lunches with you and Colin as well. Is it going to be difficult when there's a big fight and normally you have that conversation on a Sunday?
You do. There's like a bit of a hole there, isn't there? Because it's like sort of like you get into a routine and things, and you do. But imagine what the holes would be like for his family, for his wife Cindy and his kids and his grandchildren, because he was very devoted to them, and I mean, obviously we all send our condolences to them all. He's left his mark. There's a big pair of boots or shoes to be filled there.
Well, I don't think they can.
And he had a bit of masochism as well in him. You know that he supported West Ham.
Yeah, he was an East End boy, wasn't he? Yeah.
He supported West Ham. We used to have a bit of fun on the phone calls talking about that, especially when my team was doing well at the time.
Well, he saw effectively West Ham win the World Cup in '66.
Yeah, so. he was an East End boy, and he's I'm a North Londoner, and that sort of. But West Ham beat Arsenal, didn't they, recently? And I ducked the call on the Sunday.
Well, I don't think that those boots can be filled, because someone who had such a close relationship with Muhammad Ali and covered those big fights, I don't think, there won't be another Colin Hart, and I think that's his legacy.
No, his big mate was Alan Hubbard. Alan's a lovely bloke as well. I mean, there's Ken Jones, all the guys are, from the past. They were guys of an era, of a great era of newspapers as well. That's when people every day people buy newspapers. Some of those newspapers sold. Some of them would sell 3-6 million a day back then. So they were bloody good writers, all of them.
Well, look, they're all above now. Ali, Foreman, Colin. I'm sure they're having a conversation, reflecting on the rumble in the jungle. Colin's probably telling George, "I told you, I was right."
He will be.
Yeah, he wasn't scared to put his opinions out though, Colin.
No, he was opinionated, but he stood by his opinion. But if he got it wrong, he would he'd hold his hands up.
Listen, both our thoughts, everyone watching this, I'm sure, and everyone in boxing, our thoughts go out to both George's and Colin's families and loved ones, for sure. And just to close off on that, where would you put George Foreman in an all-time list, heavyweight list?
He's one of the greats.
Top 5?
Yeah, he's one of the greats. He's one of the great fighters. He was a great fighter in any era. I mean, God, he was a massive, big punching heavyweight. And he won the Olympic gold medal.
When he was told not to even go to the Olympics, you won't be ready for it.
And another thing, somebody again where boxing give him a life and a reason to change his life the way it was going, because he was, I'm not telling stories out of school. Yeah, he was a bit of a bad boy, wasn't he? A bad lad when he was a kid. So, boxing set him on the road.
Okay, well that was.
God bless them and rest. May they both rest in peace.
Absolutely. Right, let's move on to current day affairs, and Joe Joyce v Philip Hrgovic is the fight we're going to get at the Co-op Live in Manchester on April 5th. I guess satisfied with the resolution. I mean, Joyce White was something we were all looking forward to, but Hrgovic actually goes in as a bookie's favourite, heavy favourite against Joe.
I've seen that. It's a tough fight. You know, it's a tough fight for both of them. And they're both at a stage where they, you know, I mean, we talked about, it's exactly the same as it was with Dillian White. The two fighters in this fight are both in a position where the winner goes on to something bigger and the loser's going to have a real hard job re-establishing himself. That's how I see it.
What Philip Hrgovic do you think we're going to get? Because do you believe Daniel took something out of him in their fight or not?
I hope so, because I'd love to see Joe win, you know. But I don't know. But Daniel showed something that nobody else could or had showed with Hrgovic. So there is, you know, there's a bit of a blueprint there to win the fight. Can Joe do it? That's the thing. Has he still got it? Can he do it? A lot of people said he should retire.
Well, if he beats Philip Hrgovic, he'll be in a big fight next one.
That's the thing. That's what the fight is, isn't it? It's a fight where the winner's going to go on and the loser, I think, is going to struggle.
I guess Derek's shown that recently.
Same thing. I mean, he's the mandatory now, isn't it? It's unbelievable, but he is.
With Joe, I spoke to Adam Morley, who obviously manages him, and I did pose that question to him. I said, you know, the two Zhang fights were brutal KOs. Many people expected him to beat Derek. That didn't happen. Got dropped in that fight as well. Someone whose punch resistance in the early parts and middle parts of his career was incredible, but that clearly has changed a bit. And I said, we know how Joe fights. I can see people's argument for him retiring, but Adam said health-wise he's absolutely fine. Sparring-wise he's been looking good. He's taken a bit of weight off, and medically he's all okay. So from that point of view, I guess you can't argue with that.
No, you can't. He's licensed to fight. But the thing is, you know, punch resistance, you also got to remember, these guys are big hitters. It's not so much punch resistance, it's getting out of the way of the punch. You know, you don't want to be, I don't like seeing someone going there and taking shots that everyone say, oh, he's got a great chin.
Unfortunately, Joe does do that.
Yeah, well, I understand that, and that's what I'm saying. So I'm hoping that, you know, if he starts moving his head more and getting out of the way rather than we see that happen. And we'll find that out in the fight, because you can't afford to be taking shots. These guys are huge punchers, all of them.
Early rounds will be interesting because Philip obviously started incredibly well against Daniel Dubois, landed at least 20, 25 unanswered right hands on him. If Joe can weather the storm early on and drag him into deep waters, is that what you think Joe's best chance could be of a late stoppage or a points win?
I don't know. I mean, Joe can punch.
Oh, yeah.
He can punch. If he catches him, he's got to take the fight out of him. You know, I don't think it's going out there and feeling him out and moving. I think you've got to go out. You know, I mean, for me, heavyweights, you go out and you've got to take command. Take that centre of the ring, and and get behind your jab, use your jab, and just try and break your man down and let your shots go. And you don't. Joe's not a counter puncher. He's got to go forward.
Been an exciting fight. Something that also was going to be an exciting fight was Lawrence Okolie and Usyk-Dubois.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, your man Lawrence is injured. What is the injury, Frank?
I'm not sure. I think he's done something to his leg. He's out, but he's now number one in the BC, so he's in a good position. And look at him. It's a shame with that fight. I was really looking forward to it. I didn't quite know about their history, but the more I heard about it and then seeing them together, oh bloody hell, this is going to be something. This should be a bit of a lively fight. Unfortunately, it's not on. But Lawrence, as soon as he's ready, he'll be out. We'll have him out.
Okay. Usyk-Dubois did go on TalkSport and said, "Oh, there's no proof of any injury. I'm not seeing anything."
No, he's injured. I mean, come on, don't be daft.
When do you hope he's out, Lawrence?
As soon as he's fit the butts, when they let us know.
Okay. I'm guessing Richard-Riakporhe's not going to stay on the bill, Frank.
No.
Okay.
No.
David Adeleye-TKV is on the bill.
Yeah, it's now for the British title.
Yeah. Thoughts on that fight?
It's a good fight. I mean, David Adeleye had a loss against Fabio, come back in a really good win over an undefeated fighter in Solomon Dakers and put himself back in the picture. Now he's defending his title. We got him out quickly. It's going to be an interesting fight. But I think David, I like David. And I think if he gets himself right, I think he's a handful for anybody.
Daniel Dubois, you've gone on record and said June is ideally what you guys are gunning for as a team. Is that the case still? Yes, June?
For him to fight in June?
June, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're working on his fight. I hope we thought we were going to be in a position to announce it this week, but I think it'd probably be maybe another week or so.
Is him and Alexander Usyk the biggest fight in boxing? That
without a doubt. Yeah.
And in your gut, is that what you think we're going to get? Or you're not sure?
Well, I'd like to see it. If it doesn't, then it'll be something else because he's got a fight. He had to pull out that fight because of injury against Joe Parker. But we are where we are. And Joe's in a good position. Joe will be fighting as well. He's the mandatory. He's the interim champion for the WBO. And the next time, if Alexander if he doesn't get involved in a unification fight, then he's got to have his first mandatory defence, which will be against Joe Parker.
Frank, that was going to be my next question. To your knowledge, if you guys can get Usyk-Dubois 2 done, we know the WBO have ordered Usyk and Parker. Will that belt remain on the line for that fight? Yeah, it will.
Because it'll take priority because it's a unification.
Straight after that fight, though, do you think Joe will be upgraded to full WBO world champion? Is that what?
No, that would only happen if they vacated the belt. The winner vacated the belt. The winner may defend against him.
It'd have to be straight with the next fight, wouldn't it?
Whatever happens, he's in a brilliant position, Joe Parker. He's in a great position.
In the meantime, I guess he'll have one more fight.
He'd want to keep him busy, yeah. He deserves it.
I spoke to both Andy Lee and Don Charles recently, who are both very opinionated, good guys, and obviously they're going to both back their case. So Andy had said to me, "Look, we still haven't heard anything from Daniel.
There's nothing to hear. What's to hear from Daniel?
Wants the proof of the illness."
Oh, don't be so stupid! Come on. What do you mean? Where's the proof? There's a doctor of the Boxing Board of Control wrote a letter, didn't he? So that's the proof. The doctor. I mean, what planet is anyone on here?
I guess
phone the Boxing Board of Control up and say to him that Dr. Neil, asked him if he pulled Daniel out of fight and wrote a letter to that effect. Well, I don't know why we keep going down this road. I mean, it's a stupid conversation.
Well, that is what Don said to me, is that contact Frank, who's also Joe's promoter, contact the British Boxing Board of Control.
Get the Board of Control. Listen, Boxing Board of Control, if anybody calls you, show them the letter. I have no problem with that.
Okay, there's that. I guess Andy's still just trying to drum up some noise for his man, Joe.
He doesn't have to drum up noise. We drum up noise. We're his promoter. We've got him into the #1 spot. He's now the mandatory. That's where he's at, Joe Parker, and he's in a great position, whatever happens. Moving
away from all heavyweight talk, tickets gone on sale for Canelo and Skull, May 3rd, Riyadh season.
Yeah.
It's going to be a 6 a.m. ring walk, local time in Riyadh.
For the American market.
It won't actually affect them in terms of viewership.
No.
Yeah, it'll be good, like perfect times for the American audience. So we got that May 3rd. May is very busy because then on the 10th of May, I'm hearing tickets are going very well for Nottingham, for Kakachi Wood. Yeah. Expecting a full house in there.
That'll sell out. I think there's 400 or 500 tickets floating around. That's all that's left. It'll sell out.
That has just got fight written all over it, hasn't it?
Well, of course it has. I mean, that's why we made it. I mean, it's a bloody good fight. It's a domestic fight, world-class fighters, and so much on the line for both of them. It's a bloody good fight. And it's a great undercard.
Yeah. As I said, May is stacked. May 24th, Taylor Esserman as well. Recently had their face-off. I guess it's a crossroads fight. Josh has been there, top level, former undisputed champion, been in mega fights. Echo hasn't. He's been craving for it. He deserves it. And it's a winner stays on here, really, Frank.
Well, it does. And that, again, that's nigh on sold out. It's done really good business out there. Josh, you say, he wants to get another crack at the title. This is an opportunity for him to get him into that position. Echo, was it the boxing news? Their 3 fights of the year. Number 1 was the heavyweight fight between Fabio and Fraser Clark. Second fight was Echo's fight, and the third fight was Echo's fight. So you know you're going to get a great fight because Echo Esserman comes to fight. Exciting fighter, always in an exciting fight, and they're going to love that fight up there.
Okay, just get before we close, a few updates on some of your guys. Hamza Sheeraz, what's the latest on him?
Hamza is Ramadan, obviously, so he's been looking for his date. I expect him to fight sometime in July.
At super middleweight, yeah.
At super middleweight.
Okay. Sam Noakes.
Sam Noakes will be. I'm hoping he's got a run out. Sorry, not run. He's got a fight in a couple of weeks' time, and then after that, he will be in a big fight in the summer.
Is he ready for a world title, Sam?
Yeah, I think he is.
Okay. Just reflecting on Nick Ball's fight against TJ Doheny. Before we come on to the fight itself and maybe a fight with Inoue, that kick incident now, looking back at it, what did you make of the referee's call?
Well, he didn't kick him. He needed him.
I need him. Okay.
He didn't kick him. What I make of it, I mean, he was pretty, he's got the fellas holding him round the neck and won't let go of his neck. TJ just would not let go of his neck. And eventually he did, and as he walked away, he kneed him in the back of the leg, which he shouldn't have done. I'm not condoning anything either of them done. But it happened, and that is it.
Is it a different story if TJ didn't have him in a headlock initially?
Of course.
That's a different conversation.
That's why I think the referee did what he did.
I guess what's the saying? If you give one, you take one back, something like that.
So that's what happened, and it bloody turned into a really good fight. And TJ, what a game sod he was. Yeah. God, bloody, I mean, he was game.
Yeah. Nick Ball's another one. Is just exciting fight after exciting
fighter.
And I can't think of a more exciting fight than him.
Get a coin, spin it, and for excitement in the ring, him and Daniel Dubois.
Yeah.
At that level.
Yeah.
At that level.
I can't think of a more exciting fight in boxing than Inoue Ball.
Oh, God, I mean, can you imagine? So he's got to come up a weight. And let's hope he does. And if he does and we can make the fight, that'll be end of the year early or January.
Would that most likely end up in Japan or Riyadh, Frank, rather than here?
I think you're probably right, be one or the other.
Yeah.
It's a great Riyadh season fight.
Okay. Just to note someone on the card who's gathering a lot of attention is your Cuban guy, Sheeraz. Well, you said it there.
He's a handful, isn't he? I mean, the Mexican come to fight, didn't he? He was a tough sod, he was, the Mexican. And he took his lumps and there was times with our little Cuban that he stood and traded rather than...
He did get caught a couple of times.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He stood and traded instead of going out and boxing. It showed he's got a bit of a fighting heart, and I thought it was an excellent fight.
It's been calling Shakur Stevenson's name, so...
I wanted that fight. I told you that out there. We put him forward for the fight, and they didn't fancy it. They did not fancy that fight. I would make that fight in a heartbeat.
Well, let's see if we can get it done.
In a heartbeat.
Do you think he has a very good chance?
Yeah, I wouldn't put him forward.
No, I know, but it's a big call to make, right?
In a heartbeat.
Okay. Listen, Frank, appreciate your time. Obviously, a lot of this conversation was geared around what's happened this weekend with the sad losses of George and Colin, but both lived lives some of us can never dream of even half living. They both had incredible lives, and I'm so glad that Colin said to you 4 or 5 weeks ago at that lunch that he was happy and content with his life. So yeah, I think as I said, our thoughts and prayers go out to both their families and loved ones. Is there anything you'd like to add before we close off?
They led incredible lives because they were incredible people. You know, as I said earlier, God bless them and rest in peace, and our condolences to their respective families.
For sure. Frank Warren, thank you very much for your time. Actually, I do want to mention this weekend, your nephews, Warren Boxing Management, we're off to Gibraltar. We've got a show out there. So it's actually the first one we've done away from the UK since the relaunch of BoxNation. So that is on Saturday night. These cards where we're getting prospects on young fighters, giving them exposure on BoxNation and putting them in good fights. I guess for the top promoters like you can have a look at these fighters as well and see, I might take one of these on a Queensberry show. So these are important cards, these, Frank.
They are. They're like a fight score, aren't they? That's what it is. And you're quite right. If somebody really impresses, he'll come over and fight on a Queensberry card and go on to design. Yeah,
because I guess as we've seen the top level certainly progress of the sport, it feeds down, and that means these shows become more important.
It does, and they're grounding. It's a grounding experience for the fighters, and they're ticking over and hopefully building a following online, which they'll transfer over when they get onto the bigger shows and sell some tickets for the big shows.
For sure. Frank, thank you for your time. I'll see you soon.
It's a pleasure, man.